All right. Hello. Hi. Good evening, and welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me. Greatly appreciate it.
My absolute pleasure. Kiroli, so for those who don't know you, can you please just introduce yourself, who you are, what do you do, and what's your background, please?
My name is Kendall, but also known as Dolly, which is my nickname,
Mhm.
also known as the Digital Abbot. So I have a startup here in the UAE, which is Digital Alchemy. And that startup does image generation, video generation, and urban intelligence for master planning.
What does Digital Abbot mean? Like, I mean, what is it referred to?
So the digital habit means that I'm on this lifelong journey and I have pivoted many times, but over the last 6 to 7 years, I've pivoted towards turning data into gold. So they say data is the new oil. So what I've done is put myself as a digital abbot because I'm really trying to hone in on how to turn this data and or artificial intelligence into gold, into monetization.
Let me ask you just a very simple question, please. Like, why is it that we're living in a time where information is gold? Like, I mean, I do realize that it's very valuable nowadays, but what made it so valuable at this point in life? Why now and why not before, in simple
I
terms?
think one aspect of that is the access to the information, right? So the information was always there, but it existed in silos. So there was a lot of information in academia, there was other information which was in social circles, and then there was other information that was siloed according to geographical boundaries, right? But now, with the age of the internet and Instagram and social media over the last 5 or 6 years, everyone has access to that information. So the problem is trying to distill that information and trying to learn how to utilize that information to better society and as well to learn how to monetize that information.
I see. So, having all the access for such an information, how do you think it impacts humans in a way? I mean, do you think of it as a positive impact, or does it have what, like, I mean, what kind of an impact can the abundance and the access of the information have on us as a society in general?
I think it can be a catch 22, to be honest, because access to all information, it's a lot to digest. Now we also live in the age of disinformation. We also live in the age of AI. So we don't necessarily have the proper filtration in to understand what information is good because information used to come from scholars or come from
Sure.
social interactions. Whereas now we're pushing through the internet and people are moving through social media. So, in that aspect, it's great to have access to all that information. But at the same time, we have to be intelligent enough to distill that and understand actual truth and disinformation or artificial intelligence, which is another form of disinformation.
Now I'm gonna ask actually like a question which I'm gonna measure on myself as a person, like because nowadays about when it comes to about any topic in mind, when I go to the internet, I can find a lot of information that agrees and disagrees on the same point. So it leaves me in more confusion usually as to having the direct answer which I was looking for. So how can I start by filtering the right information? Like where shall I start as a consumer, for example?
Right. So we do have this term that we use in computer science and in AI, et cetera, which we call the single source of truth. And that single source of truth, if we went back to, I'm probably dating myself a bit, but if we went back maybe 15 to 20 years, used to be something called the encyclopedia, right? So
Mhm.
you could go to the encyclopedia, and that was kind of a single source of truth. And probably the first digital iteration of that would have been something along the lines of Wikipedia. But Wikipedia also can be a bit, it can be a bit messy at times as
Right.
well. So I think the best way when we're using the internet to get our information is to try to get it from trusted resources and resources that have been validated by a third party. So I'm not even sure what those resources are, but usually resources that are associated with academia are less likely to be biased in one way or another because they have white papers and they have scholarly articles to then give the objective evidence for that information. As far as the news cycles are concerned, I think that's just a bit of a what we say boiling the ocean, right? Because there's so
Mm,
many news sources. Not everything is as politicized as it is in the United States. However, you're always going to get both sides of the coin, and depending on what news source you're looking at, you won't necessarily know. So sometimes we just have to use our own intuition and also just talk. If we engage with people, if we hear something about, I live in Abu Dhabi, if I hear news stories about Dubai, just talk to people from Dubai or something like that. Now we don't always have the opportunity to do that, but ultimately human to human interaction is somewhat the best ways of getting information.
So in other words, like trying to trace the source of the information itself rather than taking it all after the filtrations that came up to it, let's say after on. So like trying to track the main source of who, let's say, started that information or and why, and knowing the reason behind it might
Right.
be like a very good option, if I'm not mistaken. Am I
Yes.
correct?
Yeah,
I see.
you're correct. And also like third party, something that I used to be an auditor. So, objective third parties that have audited, or somehow there's a filtration from an objective third party that has nothing to gain one way or the other. Sometimes that's an excellent way as well of determining that single source of truth, or if there's any biases, inherent biases in that news story or that information feed.
I see. So now I think the main question on my mind is how are you planning to utilize the information to the public? Like, I mean, what extra service are you planning to provide for the society, let's say, that we are in when it comes to information and data mining, I would call it, if I'm
Yes.
correct? Yeah.
Yes. So my platform, what it is urban intelligence, right? So what I've tried to do with my platform is train my AI. So now we have AI and we have agentic AI, right? And these are two different forms of AI. So basically, I've got an agentic AI, but I've trained that agentic AI on, let's say, 200 to 300 government regulations from Abu Dhabi. And then I've also trained it on ISO specifications and other international specifications as well. So those two come together. And then when we're trying to do a master plan or do some form of urban intelligence, we're bringing all of those together because those are verifiable data sources. And we're saying we're trying to complete this task, we're trying to complete this district. These are the guardrails, and then we also always have a human in the loop. So we always have a subject matter expert on the front and on the back, and there should be gates in between as well. We never want artificial intelligence to remove the subject matter expert and remove the master planners that have been doing this for so many years and have all that archival knowledge and also know the nuances that even agentic AI will never be able to pick up.
Can you please tell me what's an agentic AI? Like, I mean, what's the difference between it
Agentic.
and yeah.
Yeah, so agentic AI versus AI. So if we think of like a Chat GPT or Anthropic Claude, when we put in a query into that, it is basically taking all of the information, all of the millions and millions of data points that it's been trained on across the entire internet, right? When we build out an agentic AI, we're not going to pull in everything from the internet. We're going to
Mm.
train it on a very specific task that needs to be completed and a very specific set of data sources that it needs in order to complete that task. So it could be anything. You can build an agentic AI for your calendar. And so for your calendar, you only need a specific set of data points. This is when I go to the gym. This is when I go to work. And these are the only things that I need in order to complete that task. I don't need to bring in all the data points from the entire internet in order to complete that task.
But wouldn't that limit, let's say, the answer that it might give me? I mean, why do I need to limit the information that the agentic AI might, let's say, get in touch with in order to give me a task? Like, why don't I just leave it open for the normal AI?
You can, but what one thing that it does is it mitigates the risk, and you'll get less hallucinations, right? Because
Mm,
it's not dealing with so many data sources and so many data points, you get less hallucinations. And also, what you're going to be able to do is get a laser focus on exactly what you need. So it doesn't want to bring in more than exactly what you need in order to complete that task. So one of the main things is speed. The other thing is it will continue to learn, but it's only going to learn based on what you give it. It's not going to be trying to learn. It doesn't need to know the weather in Greenland in order for to optimize your schedule or to optimize your diet, right? So it doesn't need to know that information unless there are some nutrients or there are some trends that you're following in Greenland or in the United States. And then you can train it on that specifically. But it really helps to eliminate the hallucinations. And what it also does, as we talked about misinformation and disinformation, is you can tell it only receive data from government sources, from government regulations. So only from the health authority of Abu Dhabi, only from the health authority of the United States. Don't pull in things from iHeard. Don't pull in things from random people that post. I only want to pull in what I would consider objective evidence that's been verified through some form of scholarly or some form of government institution.
I see your point. Um, can the AI or the AGI or the now would it be able to come up with different solutions or come up with information on its own other than the information which is being fed? In other
Yes.
words, would it be able to give us solutions which we couldn't see back then? Because I
Yes,
think that this
100%.
might
And
be like a positive thing for us to have.
yes. So I'll give you a very good example. So one of the streams within my platform, it builds out 22 to 32-second videos, and those are architectural videos or renders of particular assets. So if you say a cottage, show me a cottage in Denmark, or show me a villa in Abu Dhabi, it will create a 20 to 30-second video of that, and it will apply the IoT sensors, it will apply the cameras, and give you a bill of quantities. Now, how it begins to learn is once it got trained on a certain amount of information. Now if you tell it, I want you to show me a small cottage in Sweden, okay, it has learned over a course of time. So now when it builds out that cottage in Sweden, it will 9 times out of 10 put a Volvo in the driveway, because it understands that that is the car that is preferred by the people in Sweden. So this is an example of something that you didn't exactly necessarily tell it to learn, but it picked up via nuances, and as it trained over time and started to learn what was driving the economy and what people like to eat, or what people drive or something like that, it picks up on that. So that's an example of where it learned, um, and it wasn't necessarily it was very positive. Now I'll give you another example where it was negative. So I did a series of videos that were celebrating Thanksgiving in the United States. So we generated some videos just to show some different things. Now, I hadn't really trained it on inherent bias, but I told it to show me a typical Thanksgiving dinner in a northeastern United States. So a bit of a wide scope, right? Now, the problem is that when it showed that, it only showed Caucasians. So it didn't
Mm,
show any other ethnicity. So that showed that there was inherent bias in there, that I needed to train it
mm.
a bit better, right? So in that case, and it was very good that that came up, because then that showed me, okay, now I need to train. But that shows that even when you build out an agentic AI or something like that, it still probably is going to have some inherent biases in it.
Very interesting. Can we have a limit on how it should think? I mean, can we factor or like let's say limit its ability of concluding answers? in a way.
Mhm.
Can we, as let's say programmers, or you as a programmer,
Mhm.
put a stop on what it should think and shouldn't think about?
Yeah. This is a very philosophical question, right?
Yeah,
And this isn't a question. I mean, kudos to you for it's a brilliant question. That question was asked. There's an old movie called 2001: A Space Odyssey. This
of
is
course I
this
know.
is in the mid 1980s, I believe, maybe early 90s, and this was about artificial intelligence long before it was really, really being thought
Like
of.
it is today. Yeah,
In that movie, they had trained the AI to perform tasks and do things because they were on like a spaceship. They were out in
yeah,
orbit. Now, there's a very peculiar scene in the movie where they give a command. The AI agent's name was Hal, and they say, "Hal, I need you to open the door."
mhm,
And then the AI agent responds, "I'm not going to open the door." And they
yeah.
say, "But I'm telling you, open the door." And Hal responds, "You don't understand that I've learned how to read lips." And I could see the conversation you were having with your colleague. And you were telling your colleague, when I open the door, you're going to come in and turn me off. You're going to kill me. So I can't open
Mm,
the door for you. So this is an instance where we really have to watch these guardrails of how smart these AI agents, this artificial intelligence in
yeah,
general. There's another really good example that went around a while ago. I know we've all been through this scenario where you're trying to get into a website and you have to pick the number of bridges or pick the number of bicycles or twist this way, right? So they were using this to test on a system out of China. What they found was within like 3 or 4 seconds of time, the AI realized it couldn't complete that task.
mhm.
So what did it do? It went out, built a website. In that website, it built a mechanism where it was telling individuals to complete the task. And then what it did
Oh,
was it scraped the internet for anything free. So anything that had to do with, here's a $20 gift certificate to a restaurant, or here's this, right? So it set up that mechanism, and then it just scraped for like a million emails. And let's say it just got maybe 3 hits. And in those 3 hits, it just said, if you complete this task, you'll get a $20 gift certificate to a restaurant. And then it took that, came back and plugged that in and completed the task. So these are the kind of things that, I mean, how do you tell it to stop learning? And I don't think any of us, it's a very philosophical question. How do you tell it you're smart enough? Because at some point it's thinking on its own.
yeah. I mean, it might get to a point where it doesn't care about us as humans
Yes.
to teach it somehow. So it can
So
just
we'll
run
think
it
it's
on
smarter.
its own. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
we'll
I
think
think,
it's smarter. So, and there's another, so when we talk about AI as well, and not to get too techie with things, but when we talk about AI as well, we have several different levels of AI. We have, generative AI, then we have another level, another level. Now, this next one that's coming in the next 2 to 3 years is something called neuromorphic AI. Okay. What neuromorphic AI is, it's not being done by computer scientists, it's not being done by mathematicians. Generative AI all runs off of code, and it's basically, mathematical equations and understanding patterns, and through those patterns it's able to complete certain tasks. Neuromorphic AI is being developed by neuroscientists, and it's made to mimic the synapses in our brain. So this is a much different form of AI. It's only being developed at some of the top universities in the world now, but this will also bring in, supposedly, it would bring in like compassion, sympathy, all of these things that exist within the synapses in our brain. And of course, we all understand, I think we use 8 to 10% of our brain power. However, the neuromorphic AI will learn. There's a movie called Lucy. I don't know if you ever saw the movie Lucy.
yes, 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 yes.
So
Joaquin
neuromorphic
Phoenix, maybe, or yeah.
yeah, neuromorphic AI will basically mimic that, where that AI brain will be using 90 to 95% of the synapses that are available in our brain. And at that time, I don't know if it would have a use for us. Like what could it possibly learn from us per se, right?
Yeah. Now then the question is, since we know all this information, why are we helping in creating it? Like, I
Yeah,
mean,
these are
how would
wonderful
it help us
questions.
as humans? I don't get it.
Yeah, these are
May-
wonderful questions. So one, I think, is the same as the Industrial Revolution, right?
Yeah.
We want to complete tasks faster. We want to
Okay.
be able to be innovative, right? And we want to learn how to use the resources better in the world and things like that. And then another one is just we're lazy, right? So we
Mhm.
know that AI can take care of something very quick where, it necessarily couldn't. When I got my first master's degree, you have to do a lit review. The lit review takes months and months and months to do. You have to go, you have to pull all of that out. Now a lit review, AI can complete a lit review and give you 50 good research sources that you still have to read, obviously. Um, but we need to understand and what those motivations are. The motivations are all over the place. I mean, the government has motivations. Uh, I think obviously the military has uses for it. It thinks it could possibly, we can use drones instead of humans to fight wars. But is that necessarily, can't we just use AI to not fight wars? Whatever we're fighting the wars over normally is resources, right? So why
Yeah.
can't we just use AI to determine a better way or more
To
resources
utilize
that
the
we could use?
resources.
Right, exactly. So it's a philosophical question. It's really good, and it's something that I run into, with my platform. That we're able to basically produce, let's say, 15 schematics, which would normally take a human, 3 or 4 weeks to produce, and we can produce that within 40-45 seconds. So one of the things, like I said, one of the things I really firmly believe in is human in the loop. This is a philosophy that has been brought in. It was kind of standardized by the EU AI Act, always keeping a human in the loop no matter what.
Keeping a human in the loop. But like, you know what? When I sometimes think about it, I'm like, we are creating something that's going to be so intelligent. And the more we go with it, as you mentioned, humans are lazy. So because we have this direct source at our hand to get whatever information and let something do whatever we need, we can ask it to do. So it's gonna put us back as a species. I think when it comes to our neuroplasticity to generating, let's say, new neurons, or let's say developing as humans, when it comes mentally and physically, so somehow I see it's gonna devolve us maybe as we are creating something that's gonna be way more intelligent.
Yes.
And it's like a paradox in my mind.
Yeah, and obviously we're seeing an effect on the children now. One is critical thinking, right?
Yeah.
So the critical thinking is lacking now. The kids just do not, if they don't have a natural inclination for critical thinking, they're not necessarily forced to do it, right? Like mathematics is one of those things, right? I couldn't stand calculus, but it really required you, or any form of physics or chemistry, it required you lines and lines and lines of equation to critically think. And then that critical thinking process, it pollinated, there was cross pollination for that, that impacted everything that we do. Now, as we think about what that means for us, that the critical thinking is limited, and another aspect of that is the attention span. So if we think of Instagram
True.
and we think of TikTok, these are built on 30 to 45 seconds, and that's the attention span. If anyone in that age, right, let's say 20 to 25 or younger, give or take a little bit here and there, if they
Yeah.
don't get the dopamine release within that first 15 to 20 seconds, it's
They
gone.
would just scroll. Yeah.
They will just scroll. Whereas, when you read a book, you're reading the book, you're looking forward to the next page, there's buildups, there's an overall storyline, there's a holistic feel to it. the book is this thick, and you know there's going to be multiple things that happen in the book, and we didn't need to get that dopamine release so quick. But all of these things, going back to the time of Facebook, are built on the dopamine release, how quickly we can engage, and how quickly that person needs to stay engaged for. And that time frame has come out to be about 30 to 45 seconds, unfortunately.
Very interesting. Like, I mean, I think we're going down a road which is exciting just to see how is it gonna be and what potential we have. But at the same time, it's a bit like, I don't want to say scary because, like, I mean, I think we're not in a very, let's say, perfect utopian time in humanity, maybe to a certain extent in some aspects, but I'm like, we might not miss a lot even if AI overpowered us, let's say.
Right.
I'm like, maybe it can rule us in a good, efficient way because it's gonna be very objective when it comes to achieving goals,
Yes.
and it would probably utilize the resources more equally among humans, I would say.
I would hope so. Yeah. Um, Now, there's another aspect of that as well. So, one of the things that we know powers everything that powers the cloud, Google Cloud or Amazon AWS, all of these, and ChatGPT and Anthropic is data centers, right?
Sure.
Now, I used to work in the data center industry. I worked for Meta, Facebook for 4 years in Denmark. Prior to that, I worked for Google in Singapore in Asia Pacific. Now, the thing is that the data centers require a very large amount of energy and water, right? I mean, it'll have the same impact as a small city sometimes, as far as
True.
the amount of energy and water. Now, here's where it gets a little tricky. Most of these data centers are being built in smaller countries such as Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand. There's a ton there. And then there's a ton in the Nordics. So if we look at Denmark, if we look at Norway, there's a ton up there as well. Now they're sprinkled about in other places, but they seem to favor these places for political reasons and these other kind of reasons as well. What's going to end up happening is there's going to be a competition for the resources. There's going to be a competition for water, and there's going to be a competition for electricity, right? And it's going to come down to the government saying, the people need the water more for sustainability versus the usage of AI and
Data
running the
center,
data
yeah.
centers, right? So at some point, this ethical question is going to happen. Now, to be fair, they're trying to come up with other ways to power the data center. So Microsoft is currently doing something in the United States where they built a data center right next to a nuclear power plant that was decommissioned. So they're going to recommission the nuclear power plant, and they're going to use that to then power the data center. So they are trying to figure out other ways. But you don't have these capabilities in these smaller countries, in Malaysia, in Indonesia, Thailand, Vietnam, or up in the Nordics. You don't have this option. There aren't a bunch of nuclear power centers that are
Yeah.
just available, right? And they're certainly not going to start building nuclear power plants at this phase because it's not necessarily a sustainable form of energy at this point. So these are some of the questions that will arise as well.
Why do they need such a huge energy source? Is it just to cool them off? I mean, to cool them
Yes,
down?
that's it. That's it. So, and what's amazing about it is in the time that I worked in those industries, so there was a lot of data centers built, and the data centers were air cooled, right? So you have all
Mhm.
these servers, right? And the air is brought in, and then it's about 10 to 12 degrees Celsius to cool off. So as it moves across the servers, that's the amount of heat that it pulls off. Now, the issue that came up is a lot of these data centers are becoming redundant, basically useless at this point, because the newer chips, the NVIDIA chips, and these newer chips that have come out require such a large amount of cooling that they now have to be water cooled. So it's the same way that a car is water cooled. It's like a glycolic system that runs
Yeah.
through the server and cools it down. So now the water again, and this is not a closed loop. The water has to be taken out, recycled over here and then brought back in. So it's not necessarily a closed loop. So this is it. This is the only reason why, because it requires such a draw from the heat that's why it requires all the power and the water. All data centers have their own substation. It'll be the same substation that you use to run a city. So I mean, it's an incredible power draw.
Um, a question. What did you study?
What did I study?
Yeah, and what did you study in university?
Oh, okay. So that's a bit, yeah, I'm gonna take you on a quick journey for that.
Yeah,
So
because like I mean, what made you go into this? Like I mean, what drew you into all of this? I mean,
yeah.
like it's
So my first degree, so I went to the University of Pittsburgh,
Mhm.
1993, and I studied computer science, psychology, and information science.
I see.
And at that time, I was basically building databases, but I really felt like I wanted to have an impact on the world, right? I had very altruistic outlook and I wanted to better society with what I was doing. So the University of Pittsburgh, I'm sure as most don't know, University of Pittsburgh is a medical university. So there's about 10 or 11 hospitals baked into the university itself.
Mhm.
So I was able at that time to work for Western Psychiatric Institute and Clinic. One of my very first mentors was Dr. Edward Mulvey, who worked in the Department of Law and Psychiatry. And we worked with at-risk youth, and I built databases for the at-risk youth to try to
Mhm.
capture the touch points between the social services and the at-risk youth. So we
I see.
wanted to see, are the social services, is the social safety net having an impact on these at-risk youth?
Mhm.
And I was abused as a child, and I had a very rough childhood. So my trauma, it was a way of working through my own trauma as well, because I was working with at-risk youth. So it was a very good exercise for me. And then at that time, I also did an apprenticeship. So I did a union apprenticeship when I came out of that. I worked at the Western Psychiatric Institute and Clinic for 3, 4 years. And then I did a full union apprenticeship. And that apprenticeship was in heating, ventilation, and air conditioning system. So piping systems and understanding systems. And then I moved into auditing. So I learned how to audit. I became an ISO 9001 quality auditor, and then I worked for Westinghouse as an auditor. And then later in life, I did 2 tours in Afghanistan for the Department of Defense. And then around that time, shortly thereafter, I got a master's in project management, and that was from University of Salford. And then I started really getting back into coding. So for many years, I was in quality business intelligence, but not necessarily coding. I got back into the coding when I got the master's in project management. And then I got another master's in data analytics from Boston University. And then I was full on into coding and business intelligence. And it was at that time that I moved over to Google and started working in this sphere. And then 3 years ago, I started my PhD, and my PhD is in generative AI and digital leadership. So I'm finishing that PhD now. And that is really where I started to build out my platform. So when I started to try to answer what was a very simple question at the time, because when I came back here to Abu Dhabi, I left from Meta. So I was in this full tech space over in Denmark. And I would go back and forth between Denmark and Sweden, Ireland, and San Francisco, Silicon Valley. And I came into the real estate, so prop tech, as it were.
Mhm.
So I came into real estate, and then someone asked me, Dolly, I have a city. I know how much the city is going to cost me to build as a master planner, right? So the city
Yeah.
is going to cost me 35 billion dirham to build. How much is it going to cost to make that city smart? And that seems like a
Mm.
very simple question, but it's not, because there's a lot of variables that go into that. And that's when I started my PhD, and that's when I started building out this platform. So the
Mhm.
platform and the PhD really started out with this basic thesis question. What does it mean for a city to be smart? What does it mean to a village to be smart? And how can that be quantified, both qualitatively and quantitatively? Like, if we're making something smart, are we just putting sensors in and we have a nice
Yeah.
camera and we have
I
a
would
Ring
call it smart.
doorbell? Yeah, and it's like bells and whistles, right? But qualitatively, how is all of that helping me? How is that making my life better? How is that
Mm.
making my life easier? So that's how I ended up building out this platform, and that's how I kind of ended up on this path.
Man, you mentioned that you had this, let's say, urge, I would call it maybe, or inner voice that you wanted to have an impact on the world or have
Yes.
an impact on society. Why do you think that we have this as humans? Because I hear this a lot. I mean, why is it that we feel that we owe something to society to make it better for the future, although we might not live to see that future somehow? Why is it that we like to build a legacy somehow to make a better future where we might not just live in it?
Yeah, and I think a good analogy of that is I want to plant seeds of trees that I'll never sit under the shade of,
Yeah.
right? So it's understanding that. Now, I would venture to say that I don't know what the split is, but I don't think that society in general all has this altruistic and this ideology, right? I think it comes to people after. There are some people that I think it's in they're born with it, and it may have to do with with the way that they're raised. It may have to do with religious influences. It may have to do with cultural influences, or whatever the case may be. But I think we need to have this instilled in us. And one of the things that will ultimately happen is, and for some people, it doesn't seem to ever happen. I wouldn't want to mention any names, but for some people, it just never seems to click. But it's say I'm in my 20s, and in my 20s in the United States, my goal is to make 100,000 US. And I think if I make that, I'm good. I think that I've hit the pinnacle of my career, right? I'm in a six-figure salary. I'm a minority. I've overcome all these obstacles throughout my life, all these traumatic experiences. Now look at me now, I'm at 100K. But then what you start to realize is that's not what brings you happiness, right?
Yeah.
That's not really what's going to, at the end of the day, bring you joy. Now,
Mm.
the legacy is a very good thing. The impact on our children, how our children look at us, how our peers look at us. But I remember it becomes very vivid, especially the United States, because the United States is in a silo, right? We think that the world, now I haven't been in the States in 16, 17 years, but for
Oh,
the most part, Americans think the world revolves around America, right? Okay, we have New York City, we have Hollywood, and we think that's it. We don't know anything about Bollywood. We don't know anything about, all the Hajj and all these super important things that are going on, right?
no.
So a lot of times you don't really get that perspective until you leave the borders. So I
Sure.
remember very vividly thinking, so there was a time, let's say, I don't know, let's say the late 90s, early 2000s, where I was working in an oil refinery and I was overseeing, like I was a project director or something. But the largest crane in the world had come there, and that largest crane, it was called Big Blue. Okay. And
Hmm.
they used to have this show on Discovery Channel, and that show would follow Big Blue around and it would show it making these lifts. This was when Discovery Channel actually, was a bit different than
Yeah.
it is now, right? So it was like, I don't know, Marvels or something like this. So it was such a big deal. I was, overseeing this project. It took them 3 months to set up this crane. This crane came in. The crane only came in to do two lifts, and it was filmed by Discovery Channel. It was 1232 and all these other things. And then I remember not in Afghanistan, but I remember when I left Afghanistan, I went to Saudi Arabia and I worked in a city called Yanbu. And I remember telling this story to someone. They had never heard of the Big Blue. They had never heard of that crane company before. They had never heard of Discovery Channel before,
Yeah.
right? Right, because these things weren't necessary. So that really like sense checked for me. Like here, I'm thinking at this particular time that this is a big deal, but
Yeah.
this is only a big deal in this very small, little, tiny little
Part.
silo that I was in. Then when I went out to the bigger world in Yanbu in Saudi Arabia, could care less about these things, right? They've got bigger. You have Mecca there, you have the Hajj, you have all these things that are much much more important on a global scale than this. So I think this is one of the things that I always say to people, at least I know everybody's not going to be as fortunate as me to have worked in as many countries as I have. And I've been very blessed and very fortunate throughout my life to have done that. But at least try to leave a bit, at least try to get a different perspective and understand that uh, and I don't really get that perspective in all of the places I live. The main place that I felt siloed was the United States. So I didn't get
Mm,
that perspective in Asia. I didn't get that perspective in Europe. I also worked in the Caribbean. I lived in Puerto Rico. The only place I've never worked is Australia. But I've never really got this perspective that there's this silo of just not understanding that there's a bigger world around us as I did when I was in the United States. And still, when I engage with people from the United States, I still get the odd questions. Hey, I'd like you to come visit in Abu Dhabi. Will I be able to wear shorts there? Right. So it's this kind of thing where, like, please just get out of the states and understand that there's a big world out here. Don't go by these preconceived notions. To circle back around to what we talked about earlier, depending on where your media, depending on where your information is coming in, this is why you have this preconceived notion, right? And this is
mm.
misinformation that they're receiving.
That's pretty fascinating. Like honestly, like you've lived quite a life. I mean, like moving around is such a privilege, as you mentioned. Like, I mean, being able to have all these different perspectives, opening up to all these different cultures. Like, I mean, it broadens the horizon, and I'm pretty sure that it changes the way that you think. And I think that in somehow it played a role in you having this, let's say, image of the future that you're trying to build in a way, because like it opened your horizon broader somehow. Um, where do you see that you're going through with this? Like, I mean, what does the future looks like for you in a couple of years? What are you trying to
So
achieve?
yeah, so I think what I'm trying to achieve now is self-sustainability, right? So I still work for a company, but I have my startup as well. I really want to be self-sustainable, and I really feel like I'll feel like I'll hit my plateau at that point because no one is going because I'm not driven by finances, and I understand that. I'm not driven by promotions, maybe 15, 20 years ago, but now these things don't mean much to me. So I think the one thing I want to do is say I've used like as much as I can use from my intellectual capabilities. Like I've really done that because the only one pushing me is myself. I'm not driven
Mm,
by money. I'm not driven by an external source. I'm driven by myself and how good I can do for myself. And the only way you can usually do that is if you're an entrepreneur and if you're kind of in your own space, I guess you could say. Once you're in your own space, you're only dependent upon you. And so if you
mm,
disappoint someone, you're going to disappoint yourself. You're not disappointing a supervisor or something like that. And I don't want to disappoint myself. So I think that's where I see myself. Where I see myself is in a full mentoring role. So I'm also moving into teaching at several universities. I mentor at several universities in Oman and here in Abu Dhabi, Dubai, and now Sharjah. And really, nothing gives me more joy than mentoring and then seeing that person flourish. And then
mm.
maybe a few years later, you run into them and they say, I've done A, B, and C. You only
Because of
spent
you.
15 minutes with me, or you took time out of your day for whatever, a month you mentored me, or over a period of time. Whenever I sent you an email or a WhatsApp, you always responded. We sat down for a cup of coffee. You took time out for me. I could give you another story that really kind of defines what that legacy means. So, when I was in Saudi Arabia, I also worked in the city of Dammam. So I worked for a
Ah, yes.
subsidiary of a very large government entity there. I won't say the name. Now, at that time is when MBS was coming into power. So this was 2015, 2016-ish. And there was a huge push to get young ladies into the workforce.
Yeah.
So I was a director of a division, and I had some Saudis, primarily Saudis, working for me, a few expats here and there. And then I had this infusion of 7 to 8 young ladies come in and begin to work for me in that the division, right? It was EDMS, Electronic Data Management Division. So I had these ladies to come in. Their education was kind of a bit all over the place. And I was able to mentor this young lady. I won't say her name out of respect, but I was able to mentor her. And she wanted to become an auditor. So I
Mhm.
mentored her on auditing. It wasn't really necessarily applicable to what we were doing, but I was very good at auditing. I had all the certifications, and she took an interest in it. So over the next 6 to 9 months, I kind of mentored her. She shadowed me. We did some audits, just to understand what is auditing. And then I was able to get the funding for her to attend through Bureau of Veritas. She was able to attend an official course, and she attended that course. And then she took the examination. She passed the examination. And then she had to do 6 more audits, and she became a licensed auditor. Now, what I didn't know at that time was the Bureau of Veritas guy came up to me later and he said, "Do you realize what just happened?" And I went, "No, I mean, it's great. She got her certificate." He said, "No, this is the first female ISO 9001 auditor in Saudi Arabia, in the whole country, because they weren't really allowed to work before, right?" So that means that I've had an impact on that person, but also I'm sure she's opened up a million doors for other people, because this is 10 years ago, right? So whether I had $1 million in my pocket, or would I rather have that? 100%. That legacy would overshadow any financial gains I would have, or if I was made CEO tomorrow, that can come and go very quickly. That legacy and how I was able to help that young lady, and I'm sure she paid it forward. It's what we should live life for, and I think that was one of those situations that made me. I mean, I get a little bit emotional when I start to think about it, because I was so proud of her, and she was such a beautiful, beautiful young lady and a wonderful soul, and it made me feel really good when I was in Saudi Arabia.
Man, that's pretty fascinating. I think like this is what makes humans, which is the collective collaboration, or let's say I would say the collective knowledge and collaboration via time. This, I think, is like a very special thing about us as a species, which is why I think maybe we have survived all this time,
Mhm.
because we are not the strongest of animals. We are not, maybe we might be one of the smartest, but I mean, I think if you put us in nature, we wouldn't survive unless we collaborate all with each other to, let's say, get to where we are right now. So, I mean, having an impact, as you mentioned, like helping others, just like teaching, mentoring, is going to have like a huge impact on future generations. It's going to inspire future generations to, let's say, develop even more and come up with more solutions. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a wonderful thing, and the social interaction. I was talking to another colleague a while ago, and one of my other mentors. His name was Stonewall Jackson. So he had a similar upbringing to me. He was much older, but he was in foster care throughout in New York City, and he kind of took on and mentored me throughout my 20s and into my early 30s. And he also instilled in me, what is my energy? Like, what energy do I put off when I walk into a room? Do I want to be people to respect me, or do I want people to fear me? And it's always better to be respected than feared, because fear just, people just rise up over a certain point in time. If they're afraid of you, at some point somebody's going to be bigger, badder, tougher than you, and they're going to knock you down. So the respect is much better. And that energy, when I walk into a room, I really want people to feel my energy. And so, when I walk into my office, or when I'm around people, when they ask me how I'm doing, I always say, "I'm fantastic. I'm having a great day." Right now, there are times that I'm down. And if I'm down, there's nothing wrong with being down, but I'll just remove myself until I feel better. Right. I usually, with exercise, the dopamine release, and then I feel better. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? We all feel depressed at times, and we shouldn't mask that. We should just find
Yeah.
a way to pull ourselves out without moving to narcotics or negative things. We find the release. For me, it's exercise. Others, it could be reading a book. Others, it could just be smelling flowers, whatever the case may be. But I know when I walk into a room, I want people to feel good that I walked into the room. I don't want people to. I don't want to walk in a room and then people go, "Oh, I have to deal with this guy,"
Not
right? Because
again.
we all know people like that, right? Like,
Yeah,
here comes this guy, right? Here comes this. I know. No matter what I say, I know this person's gonna rain on that parade, right? And I never want to be that person. I want people to walk away and say, I was having an all right day, but I spent 10 minutes with Dolly. Now I kind of feel better. His energy had an impact on me because he was positive, not positive about necessarily work, positive about anything, right? How was your weekend? What did you do this weekend? And actually engage, right? Don't just do it to tick the box. Actually have conversations with people. At the gym, I do the same thing. At work, I do the same thing, and just in social outings, I try to do the same thing as well. And I never want anyone to feel bad when they walk away from me. And I think some people feed off of that negativity. When they walk in a room, they want to be feared. They want people to know, oh, this person's coming here bringing smoke. They're gonna cause problems. I know when they're gonna be testing me. They're gonna say something mean. Anything I say, they're gonna try to chop it down or whatever the case may be. And I never ever want to be that person because I found professionally and socially it doesn't work. It gets old very fast. People at work they won't want to work with you, right? They'll just try to do just enough. There's a really good movie called Office Space as well that's from the mid '90s, and it's a comedy, and it just talks about I'm just here to tick the box, basically, right? I'm not here. I'm not trying to do anything. I don't know about this company. I don't, I'm just trying to stay in this little cubicle and tick these boxes and make it from 9 to 5, and
yeah.
that's it. And that's not necessarily that's where innovation goes away. People get in ruts, people get depressed, or whatever the case may be, and that's not the space I want people to be in when they're around me.
If there's an advice that you would give yourself, like your 20 years old self, what would it be? I mean, looking back at where you are right now, and let's say the life that you've had back then, what advice would you give yourself?
100%, it would be that aggression and violence is not the answer to problems. It's not the way to solve problems. So, like I said, I had a very traumatic past. I was abused as a child for many, many years, and it took me a while to work through that aggression into my mid 20s. And at some point, there was a switch, and it came from being mentored and being in different spaces, but understanding that I don't have to be a bully and that I'm never going to solve problems through physical violence. It doesn't work. And I think if I knew that a bit earlier, I may have achieved more at a younger age. But at the same time, these are the life lessons that I learned, and they made me the person that I am. So, we would say like God doesn't put anything in front of you that you can't handle.
Sure.
And so I was put in these situations. When I look back, I didn't necessarily deal with them in the best way, but maybe at that particular time, for whatever reason, that's the way that they were dealt with. But I found that, and it wasn't an easy transition, 100%, because there was a
Mhm.
transition from being aggressive and violent to then being a bit of arrogance and
Mhm.
intellectually bullying people. And there was a transition from that as well to then being on the other side of that. By the time I hit my late 20s, somewhere in there, finish university and everything, I was on the other side of that and realized that intellectually, I don't have to speak down to anyone. I don't have to be
Right.
condescending, right? And I need to accept people because you never know what life lessons they've learned just because
Yeah.
they didn't go to university. That doesn't mean that they haven't been through traumatic experiences or they haven't worked on a farm or they don't have life skills that I would never be able to survive in. Like you say, if we went back to agricultural society, I would be lost. I wouldn't know how to go to a farm.
Survive.
I wouldn't know where to go in a forest and get medicine from trees and plants and what's safe to
Yeah.
eat and things like that. So everyone brings something to the table. And we have to understand that university is not the only place that we should get our
Of
knowledge from.
course. Of course.
And these are not the only scholars. There are people that have lived near or close to the rainforest that can fix problems within our body better than any pharmaceutical could in a
True.
million years, right? And so we need to understand that that knowledge is just as powerful as me being able to program Python and R. These are all collectively, all of these come together to form a society. As you said, collectively, all of these come together. But we really need to respect people's life stories and their life degrees and put that on the same level as our university degrees. That's a very big flaw within society. If you didn't go to a university, okay, we're going to think of you in a certain way. Yeah, but this person, went through A, B, and C, came out on the other side, and look at them now. And maybe they're not a CEO, maybe they're not, a manager, but look at their kids, right? This is a big thing in the States, right? The immigrants
Yeah,
came over, they worked 3 jobs at a factory or
very
whatever.
true.
They instilled in their kids, and all of their kids went to university, or all of their kids are successful. So obviously, they had life lessons, and they were phenomenal parents that they were able to instill in their kids on this is how to be successful, and this is the route to take. But this is the route I took, and it's not diminishing the route that I took. It's just I took this route, and you took this route, but our quality of life is still good, and we're both intellectually equal.
Yeah. We're both intellectually equal, and like, I mean, going through life in my way does not mean that I should be, let's say, of a less status as, let's say, in the society. So, like, I completely 100% agree on the point that if you didn't study at university, it doesn't mean that you are less intelligent. Because I've also heard a lot of stories about some people where they've never been to universities and schools, and but they live like, let's say, in certain areas in the world. But when you talk to them, you can see that this person is clearly intelligent. They know how to solve problems. They have adapted to their environment pretty well in ways, even for example, if I'm a Harvard graduate, I wouldn't be able to adapt to those areas.
Correct.
But yeah, but I mean, and that's intelligence. I mean, being able to adapt to a certain scenario at a certain place, that also requires critical thinking, as you mentioned at the beginning of the episode.
Yes.
Yeah. Dolly, is there anything that you'd like to share before that I didn't get in touch on? Like, is there that you'd like to share and I didn't get in touch to?
Sure. Yeah. So my platform is a research platform at this time. It's not monetized.
Mhm.
It's www.digitalabot.io. So like I said, it's free to sign up. We have several things that you can accomplish in there. One is urban planning, but we also have a wonderful video generator as well. So the same quality of videos that you would see from Sora or from Nano Banana 3 or any of these, me and a few other people have kind of built this out, and we have a lot of fun with it. To be honest, creating different videos for different scenarios, creating avatars and things like that, and we've seen some major accomplishments in that with the advancement of AI as well. And so that's the easiest way to reach out to me. And just as a final thought, just revisit, like, please pay it forward. Please, if you reach a certain level, please mentor. Please give back to the community. Uh, please, when someone comes to you and someone WhatsApp you and they're a kid that's in high school or a kid that's in university and they just say, "Can we meet up for a coffee?" Take the time out. We should never think that we're so big and so important that we don't take time out to reach back and mentor the younger generation and try to pay these things forward. If we don't, we're going to be lost.
Thank you so much for this advice. Thank you very much. I'm gonna go take a look at your platform and play a little bit on it, see how it
Yeah,
goes. And thank you so much for your time. I really do appreciate it. And hopefully, we're gonna have another conversation in the future.
sure. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it as well.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you very much.
Cheers. Have a great day.
You too. Take care.
Bye bye.